Det nå tid for dagens andre keynote, og vi har fått med oss professor Torgny Roxå, som arbeider med strategisk pedagogisk utvikling ved Center for Engineering Education ved Lunds universitet. Han utviklet det pedagogiske akademiet Lund Excellent Teaching Practitioner og har vært visepresident for The International Society for the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, som hadde konferanse i Bergen i oktober. Torgny forsker på strategisk endring i undervisningskulturer i høyere utdanning, og i dag skal han ta et kritisk blikk på studentevalueringer. Bruker vi deg på feil måte?
Ja. Thank you very much. I'm going to do this in English because we have an English guest. And as I tried to explain to Paul, it's actually doing us a favor, I think, and you can sort of ponder on this, is that we do, Swedish, Danish, and Norwegian, and we really want to understand each other. But it's easier in a way, I think, because I don't notice when I don't understand. In Denmark, I always notice when I don't understand, and that is hard too. So I take Paul as a reason to actually do this keynote in English, and I hope you think that is okay. And you don't have any say, so I'm going to do it in English anyway. I also want to emphasize something about myself. There is one tiny detail that I want you all to know about me for reasons that are very personal to me, and that is that I am face blind, so I don't recognize people. And it's really hard to understand what that means unless you experience me not remembering you. So I just want to tell you that. It's embarrassing and it's problematic for me, and that's why I tell everybody, as many as I can, about this. Okay, so today we're going to talk about student evaluations of teaching, which I shorten in SET as the way to express it. And there are loads of things to say about SET. So I think I'm going to do this quite fast today. There will be a lot of information, even though I'm aware of the fact that we just have lunch. When I taught oral presentation during the entire 90s to researchers, I always told them that this is called the dead hour. Because all concentration in your body, the biology thing, is going to the stomach, processing things, and the brain is sort of slightly trying to tag along here. And so I'm aware of that. But still, I'm going to try to do this in a way which helps you to get some new thoughts. I think I set the goal for 3 thoughts. All of you should get 3 new ideas from this. And if I manage to do that, I actually changed you for the entire life you still have. Because new ideas are like pieces of DNA going into your presentation of your own self. If you get a new idea and that piece is really into your identity, it's going to influence you heavily as you live on. And that's my goal. See where we go. So what I mean by SET here is this is not really any special. I just wanted to say something so you know what I mean. It's about getting information from the students in a fairly systematic way mostly, and then try to sort of use it for something. And we're going to come back to that. We have an increase in all these measuring stuff. We already heard Tone. I love the differentiation between accountability and responsibility. And it's a fantastic way of putting it. And it really made me think a new idea. And I'm going to use that many times ahead. But who has the problem? It's an interesting thing to talk about. Who wants things to be evaluated and for what purpose? And if I look into a Swedish context, there is something called the SOM Institute. It's a political science group in Gothenburg doing huge surveys on Swedish society and, among other things, how much we trust societal institutions in Sweden. And that has been going on for a long time. And they have high standards and a really sort of something that we talk about as facts when we talk about these things in Sweden. And I wanted to show you this one. So 65% of the Swedish population have high or very high trust or faith in higher education, in universities. So we are doing well. And I think we should remember that. Whenever we talk about change, about accountability, about everything, that still we are doing well. But I come from Lund University. We are around 80, 100 in ranking in the world. So we are in the Champions League of higher education. But we can win. You know, it's always about becoming better, because universities and academia is about learning. So it's always something new. And there is no reason to think that even though we're good now, we will be good next year or 10 years from now. But when it comes to quality assurance and quality measurements and all that kind of stuff, it might not be that we have the urgent problem. It might be the government that has the urgent problem. And the governmental problem might spill onto us, because we elect governments to take care of countries, and we are part of the country. So that seems to be logical, doesn't it? But I think this one is really important to keep in mind. It's not an acute problem. And there are also other things. Mitchell Dean writes books about how do you control societies in the neoliberal era when we're all supposed to think for ourselves and still we have to be controlled. And that is like what they try to do. They, you know, whoever is in power, try to create a huge IKEA warehouse where we think only the thoughts that they want us to think. It's like walking around in IKEA warehouse buying stuff I had no idea I wanted. And they do that by organizing the reality in such a way so I think I got the idea myself. And that can be done in a societal scale, and Mitchell Dean writes books about that, really interesting to read. But that's a big one. Now let's go into academia again. I've been working with educational development now for 30 years, 31 to be exact, at Lund University, and many things have happened. We are probably much better now than we were 25 years ago in supporting student learning. But there are still a lot of things to be done. And student evaluations of teaching is an important and interesting thing here. And I want to test you. Last year, I think, I was part of a research project at McMaster University in Canada where we interviewed teaching assistants, how they made decisions in front of students, these very unexperienced teachers. And one of them said, he was describing a problem in the teaching situation, and he was frustrated in saying, the phones, you know, students bring out phones. The phones, man, the phones, he said, really problematic for him. So now I want all of you to bring out your phones. Bring out your phones or a laptop, that's okay, but get an internet access. And I want you to answer this question here. So you just go to menti.com, you add the code, and you get straight in here, and you can pick one. Here we go. Let's put some time pressure on this. If I can read. I can't read without glasses, no. Let's add a countdown. You get 30 seconds because this is the first of a series of votes. Yeah, 15 seconds to go. Oh, we get, coming numbers now. 7 seconds. Hurry up, hurry up. And there, time is out. Sorry, I mean, I know some of you didn't vote, but this is not a democratic investigation. This is a warm-up exercise for this talk. What I want you to think about here is that those people that you really talk to, I mean seriously, talk about your work with, those are your significant others, and those few you mentioned there, most of you have between 3 and 5, are your significant network. And we check this with academic teachers, and in our, Katarina Mortensen and I, and in our research, it's between 3 and 5. We say 4 plus minus 2. That's where the bulk of people are. Others are more connected, but usually this is where it is. And this has been redone in Australia, in the UK, in America, Hawaii actually, I wish I was invited to there, and in Finland and in other places. It seems to be fairly stable, this. Think about it now. If you want something to change, if you change, you will have an impact on your significant network. It means that your old friends now have to cope with you saying other things in new ways than you did before. And there is an intense feedback process going through these. So I would say you will never change anything in academia unless you get into people's significant networks. So this kind of conversation we're talking about, the significant conversation, is extremely crucial when it comes to get change going. But that's not the topic for today. I want you to go to another one. So how widespread are set in your institution? And now you know the drill, so I can put a time limit on you a bit quicker now. "15 seconds to go. Let's see if we can get higher than last time. We had 149, I think. Oh, we're doing better. Excellent. Okay. That's a lot of student evaluations of teaching. I mean, I didn't ask you very much detail about how this is done, so we can have all sorts of ideas about how it is done, but it is a lot. It's a lot of effort going into this. So let's keep that in our memory as my start sort of continues later on. Here's another one. Why do we have set? And here you can click more than one. If you want sort of others I haven't thought about, or several of them. Oh, countdown. 30 seconds again. Well, one. I thought there was someone coming on there in the red one. Yeah, 5 seconds. When we are above 200, things like you started to get the hang of this now. Okay. So discriminate between teachers. We don't do that a lot. But when I worked at McMaster, I realized that's what they do. North America seems to be very frequent that you actually deliver raise in salary and promotion based on this. And you get sort of, you're taught this year you got 4.7, last year you have 4.4, so you must be a better teacher now, so you get a raise in salary. I'm simplifying stuff now, of course, but I heard those things, and there was a lot of debate about this in Canada. And there also been a legislation or something, some people drew it to court and they banned one institution from using student evaluations of teaching in these processes. So it's actually been legal processes in Canada about these things. And we don't do it in Lund, we don't do it in Sweden, and obviously we don't do it in Norway much. But we do want student voices. It's a way of inviting their experience. Well, keep that in mind. We want to report on quality and develop practice. Those are more or less the same. But that is really interesting. Do we do that? So what about this one? What does SET manage to do in your institution? And now I want you to think in 2 dimensions here. Measuring quality and fuel development or pushing development. It's a bit more complicated, but you're all academics. I'll give you 30 seconds from now. My God. You know, I work with engineers. I'm not an engineer myself, but I work with engineers. I lived with them for 25 years, and I don't know what they would say about this. And we only got the one in the middle. So you saw there was absolutely no connection as far as I could sort of assess as it was going on here. Yeah, it seems like we're trying, but some of us do it and some don't, and it's all over the place. To cite the Swedish prince, actually, when he got his first kid, that was a famous quote on the press conference. They asked him, "How do you feel the prince then, who is a common person, but he's still a prince now. And he said, my feelings are all over the place, he said. And he became famous for that. I kind of loved it because I've been there myself, You get this sort of tiny thing in your hands as a man because you haven't felt it before, and you're trying to get, so what is this, And over the place is probably very, very accurate. Okay, so we do a lot of SET, right? And we try to say that support development, measure quality, and give student a voice. That's probably the most common ones. But what I think intuitively we mostly do, as we just create dead data. And if you're really clever now, you recognize that that's the end scene in the first Indiana Jones movie. So that's the arc. And I would say that's what happens to most of the SET results that we produce. They just end up somewhere. And that is a problem. But they're here to stay, but there are a few problems. Now I'm going to go into the talk. This was just warm-up. I used to be a soccer coach for girls for 10 years, so warm-up is really important. Let's now move into the real stuff. Here's an example from American Air Force. 1956 this is, all right? They had 89 instructors, huge amount of trainees, and they were doing a piece of training, and in the end of this piece of training, they were external examiners examining students doing real-life problems, as real-life they could do it in an Air Force academy, and they were assessing that and trying to, what is the sort of link between all these? So you can see now that the instructors was self-assessing, rating, they used that term. They were rating each other, and they had supervisors who rated them. They were teachers rating students, trainees rating the teachers, and then we have 6 trained assessors with criteria assessing the outcome of the process, and this is what they came up with. Instructors' self-peer rating and supervisor rating were correlated with each other, but not with the students' rating. And there were absolutely no correlation to the end assessment of what they were capable of doing. So this is an illustration of there is something wrong. There is a problem with student evaluations of teaching. And this was 1956. We've known it for a long time. They actually refer to a paper from 1932, which I couldn't find. So sometimes in academia, the turnaround for information to become knowledge seems to be endless, which is frustrating, I think. There is an amazing meta-analysis coming out 2017. This is a big one, and they put in their title that there is no relation between student rating of teaching and teachers and courses and their learning. To be honest here, I don't like this one. It's the kind of article I read, and it's so excellently done. It's a fantastic article, and I hate it. Because down in my spine somewhere, I have this conviction that it does matter, Students are people, clever, intelligent, and they say something. Would that be totally unrelated to the outcome? And it bothers me. And if any one of you is a perfect, I wouldn't say that, but really good statistician, we have a database of 250,000 surveys, and you could cross-check to all the database producing student grades on all courses since 2003, and if you could find at least some variation there, that would be excellent, because that would mean there is probably something in here, and they didn't manage to find it. But it is disturbing, this. Yeah. Here's another one, another article, O'Donovan, fantastic person writing interesting stuff. She is teaching economics. And she recognizes when students start to study, some of them had an absolute idea about knowledge. I'm here now, I'm going to get the right answers. I'm pretty sure you've all seen those students. They come into university, and this is where I'm going to know. Tell me the right stuff, right? Then you go through transitional, as she says, independent, contextual. This is built on William Perry's scale and other scales. So we could debate whether this is sort of the best way of doing it, but it's one way of showing that students move from some kind of understanding of knowledge to some understanding which we find to be a better one and that we find to be needed in the society. And that was the answer to Paul's question. Why do we need higher education? We want people to go through this, right? And just to be very clear here, because sometimes it seems like we are all academics so we can do it. And that is not true. Research doesn't secure critical thinking in all domains. That was the start of Paul's talk, wasn't it? You might be extremely clever in biomechanics, and then you're just stupid absolute person outside that. So there is no vaccine here. It's just a struggle, ongoing work to actually improve your critical thinking. Anyway, she wanted to rate her 200 beginner students, and how do you think they sort of... So there should be a number here ending up with 200, summing up to 200. What do you think? These are beginner students, so where would they be? And here are her results. That's a variation. It's a spread. To me, it seems realistic. I mean, not all students start from 1 and end up at the sort of top. It's a sort of messy stuff that goes on. But her point here is if you ask those students on the top, the biggest group, was it good teaching? And you just all ask for their opinion, right? Was there a good teacher? Was the books good? Was the process good? Was the examination good? What is the likelihood that they will rate anything which is good that really frustrated them? That really provoked them? That were going through a dissonant process for weeks, not understanding, trying to grapple with things, and you ask the teacher, you ask them then in student evaluations of teaching, was there a clear structure in the course? If they all say no, that might be a sign of excellent teaching. But it might just as well be a sign of absolutely awful teaching, right? The message here is you don't know unless you know from which position the students answer. And that is so problematic in so many student evaluations teaching schemes I've seen. They just sort of in a sort of market-driven customer interest ask people to more or less press the yellow, green or red button when you exit the toilet at the airport. I mean, it's so bloody rubbish. And why do we do it? All of you, I suppose, are trained in a field somewhere and gone through this. And it's a sign that you were right, Paul. Because we would never go for those rubbish schemes if we used the critical thinking from one domain and talked when we talked about the others. But there are so many of these around. They are becoming better, right? I was looking at the UK National Student Survey, which is one of the biggest sort of evaluating schemes, and what's it called? Teaching Excellence Framework they invented in the UK. They always do things in grand scale. We recognize that from this side of the North Sea. And then they export it to their empire, which is not an empire anymore, but it seems to be an academic empire. And it's not a really good scheme. It's built on stuff, but it's also other stuff built into it. And I'm pretty sure they don't have a clue. But as I said in the beginning, the government has a problem. And they will probably, as politicians, do anything that they think can solve their problem. But that doesn't mean that they necessarily solve our problems, right? And following on into that rubbish world is definitely not our problem, right? Or it creates our problem. So here's another illustration. If we have 50% deep approach to learning students and 50% student approach to learning, and we get sort of 4.5 in the other end, what do we know about that teaching? Well, as I said, I'm not an engineer. I can't do math. I don't do statistics, but I've lived with engineers, and they would probably say close to nothing. Thank you. Well, probably an engineer here somewhere. And there are loads of other biases. I'm not going to go through this. And you find them everywhere nowadays. My favorite, which I don't approve of, I think that's a very strange article, is that student evaluations of teaching vary with weather. That's an Italian one. And what kind of weather do they have in Italy? But the Quan 1999 is an excellent piece of research. It's thousands of courses. He shows that, if you offer your course on third level in the building, you get less good student evaluations of teaching compared to if you have given it on the first floor. And there are all sorts of things going into this. Yeah, we can't trust these things. And of course, teachers know this. And how do they feel about it? In our world, I'm going to go closer into my world later on here. You get an email, right? You get an email from the system. Here's your student evaluation. And you click on that email. Poof, here it comes. And I think about what are the feelings going through that person from you get the email, you understand what it is, until you have clicked and see what comes up, right? In the beginning, we used a pie chart. And when you had bad student evaluations, it was black. Oh my God, how stupid were we, right? Because that created, do you want to open it? You have this memory of the course. It didn't work that well, and here I get a black and white black. And so I click it, and gosh, how do I hunger for this kind of feedback when it's presented in that way? When I knew all these biases. So student evaluations of teaching are moving into sort of the next section of this, from bias, from questions, into what processes do we use when we try to enhance the use of this material? Because it is a material. Student evaluations of teaching is not data. It's a material that we have to transform into. You know this. Any political scientist, sociologist, whatever, you name it, wherever you are, you know that you can't just look at this and then draw a conclusion. You have to decide, why do I transform it like this? What kind of analysis do I do, and for what purpose, and what is my position when I do that? This is standard stuff, and it's not done in many places. And my belief, for the reason why it's done so in such a bad way, is that we don't like them. We know they are not good, but we are forced to use them. So that's us, seniors in the institutions, we do what any first-term students would do faced with bad teaching. We would try to figure out, what does this bloody professor want on the exam? And then we produce that, and after that we are sure we will never go to this department anymore. And that goes back to us, because when we act as students, it actually have a bad impact on our teachers and on our students, right? That's bad responsibility. Taking that responsibility is probably one of the most important leadership acts that we can do. Taking it seriously, right? Well, it was the dead hour, and I thought this demands some energy here. I can tell you, surprisingly little is done on academic teachers' feelings, which is strange. There are libraries written about how you phrase questions. Most of that is not interesting. And there are libraries of literature done on what ends? Do they change anything? Are they good for some purpose? And then in the middle there, we have a black box. And that's where the teacher's feelings are. The teachers are in there. And basically no one ever showed any interest. We did one of these research that are on there. I did together with a psychologist. And she started to interview teachers in engineering. And the first interview she came back to say, my God, there is no words for feelings here. If I would have asked people in psychology, what do you feel about student evaluations? They would talk for hours. And you ask someone in engineering, and they say, when you get bad students, it doesn't feel good. So what do? I usually go biking, one of them said. And that is, of course, because of the culture in engineering. It's not a culture where you create new ways of talking about feelings, right? And that is also interesting, because academic teachers are people. There is little study from Finland about teachers in downward spirals or upward spirals as a reason for bad and good student evaluations of teaching. And the downward spiral is not a good read. There's something Shakespeare would have written tragedies from. I feel for those teachers. Yeah, and some teachers use SET to talk bad about students. Edström shown that in a study from Stockholm. That you get these bad student evaluations of teaching into the group, and you start talking about how these lazy, not intelligent students produce this stuff, and that is so bad. Oh, God. Most people don't talk at all, which Kembe shows in a fantastic study from Hong Kong, that they don't care, like we seem not to care. What time is it? He was drinking coffee, so I thought maybe the time is up. So I'm not. But you don't have to know that. Administrators and managers, though, believe more in SET than teachers do. And that makes sense to me as well. Because what else would they believe in? Because academic teachers are in the thing, you know? They're in the room. So, of course, when they assess whether it worked well or not, they use these feelings, these responses, this talk, this conversation with students, the processes, everything they see, they use to decide whether this worked or not. But if you think about administrators and managers, they were not there, so they have no clue. So it's understandable that they use these, because they are called on in the new public management era that we work on, that, you know, if you're a manager, you should really be a manager, whatever that means, right? And of course, if you want to take responsibility then in your management role, you get the data you have. And here are student evaluations of teaching. Good, I can work that, because, as we heard on the talk yesterday evening, there are numbers. That was the message, wasn't it? We all, students as us, because students and we, it's not a big difference. It's basically the same biological sort of suit that we have, and it works in similar ways. If there are numbers, big numbers, the bigger the better, right? Even though we know, if we stay back a little bit, the big numbers, just as big as they are, just as many approximations are they built into them. And as researchers, we know that, right? And approximations hide complexity. And we all know that too. Oh, so should we abandon these altogether? No, I say. Because there are suggestions. The bad article from Utl I showed you earlier, the ones that are saying there is no link, they actually suggest for institutional leaders to actually start considering taking out student evaluations of teaching. But I mean, that seems crazy. We do things as organizations to thousands of people. We already talked about the intellectual trajectory they go through. We change them, you know. That's how we should recruit people to universities. Come to us. And once you've been here for 3 or 5 years, we promise you, your mother will never recognize you again. You will have totally new friends, and the old ones will hate you, and you will not have an idea how clever or unclever or dumb you were 5 years ago, because we do change people. And do that without asking them about it seems to be such a stupid idea. So it must be that we should do it better, right? And that is hard. Here are some things I think we could think further on. We need to know what we are measuring. And we can't just ask people about their opinion on this. We need to know what we should do with these results before we start, because that's what we do in research projects. And we're good at research projects. So why don't depict this as a research project instead? We probably need to align other development interventions with this, because the downward spiral teachers need some kind of support, counseling, collegial cultures, whatever, to take themselves out on that. The student evaluations of teachers themselves will not help them, right? And we need to know, what does it say? We need to do what we say we are going to do. Because usually in academia, or many cases I would say, I wouldn't say usually because that's too ambitious, but in many cases we say we're going to do something and we don't. How many deadlines are students negotiating? Right? And I do pedagogical courses for teachers, and I tell them there is a deadline here. Ah, yeah. So I'm just like anyone else. Yeah, I know you're in a problem, you know, I know lots of things, research applications to write. So, yeah, if you come in sort of 2 weeks later, and they come back with an email 2.5 years later and say, now I've done it. Can I get my diploma now? And I say, oh, lucky you, good. Yeah, we have a copy here because we save everything for you. And so teachers, students, or me, or you are very much similar people in this, right? But we need to start doing what we say we're going to do and take responsibility for eventual bad outcomes. I'm going to show you now what we do at LTH, where I work. This is the Faculty of Engineering at Lund University. We're about 650-something senior teachers, about 550 doctoral students, about 9,000 undergraduate students. This is sort of a big, slightly big place. We have 5-year-long programs. 3 of those are mandatory courses, usually a lot of math. It's a question I bear with me. You know, the engineering curricula looks more or less the same as it did 100 years ago when we started in Stockholm, in Sweden. It's a lot of math and physics, or stuff like in the beginning, before you need to know that, before you're allowed to work on the real stuff, we say to them. So engineers, as you know, have transformed our experience of the world totally. Most of you have phones, computers, you go by train or you go by anything, medical care, everything engineers have been in with their hands and changed it, right? Except how they organize their own curricula. Which is frustrating. But why should they, on the other hand? You know, engineers are on the top. They're going to save the world. They're heroes of the future. They're going to do all the new technologies, save the economy, and do everything. And the knowledge competitive, what is that called? The competitiveness of knowledge, you know, countries competing with each other and all that kind of rubbish. When it comes to this, and engineers at the top, humanities on the other side. On the other hand, in my place, we are starving them. There is no longer lots of research money. There are few students, and they are sort of having a pessimistic outlook. And they reinvent themselves. They do totally different things now than compared to when I was there during the 80s. Because they have to. Engineers don't have to. So they don't do it. Obviously. Okay. This is our numbers on the question I asked you. These are students saying this. So we have asked the students how many, and there were about 1,500 of them answering. So you say mostly always, that's a lot, isn't it? It's 91%. So we do a lot of student evaluations of teaching. And I'm going to show you now how we do it. And when I do that, please remember that I'm not claiming now this is the answer to everything, all the problems I pointed out. This is how far we have gone. And they're all reasons to overtake us and go further, because there are much more to be done, right? I try to go there with, thank you very much, Shaw. We call it reporting evaluation, because these are engineers. So instead of using summative, which is an educational word, we use reporting, because that's what these are doing. They report on the quality to someone who wasn't there. To me, that seems to be straightforward. That's what we do. So we also do operative evaluation. It's in the policy, and that's what teachers are supposed to do with their students as they are in the course. That's classroom assessment techniques, if you're familiar with that. All sorts of easy, quick feedback loops. But this is the reporting I'm talking about here. So we use the course experience questionnaire developed by Paul Ramsden from Australia. It's supposed to measure whether courses support deep approach to learning. As good as it can get, sort of, from a survey, where you lose a lot of data when you compile that. But anyhow, if you have big numbers and you're showing good numbers, you don't probably have a course that supports deep approach to learning. If you have low numbers, you probably have a course supporting surface approach to learning. But it's all a likely thing, right? So it's not a one-to-one causal relationship. But that's what we do. So they fill out that 25 items, which is a Likert scale. I'll show you the questions later on, or a few of them, and 2 open-ended questions where students can write anything, right? Give us an example of how to improve the course, and what did you learn throughout this course, right? Next stage, we have student representatives going through all open-ended answers. And they take away things that they consider to be offensive to the teacher. We have no idea what they take out. We could do research on that, but we haven't done it. We don't interfere with what they do. We give this task to the student union, and we pay them for it, and they do it, right? So remember that now, that there is a filter here, but we don't know the extent of that filter or the nature. We produce a working report. Background statistics, survey statistics, open-ended comments are still in there. Background is how many did enroll in the course, men and women, which is a problem in electrical engineering because there are almost no women there. So the one thing that emerged here is that students increasingly do not tick whether they're a man or a woman. And we don't have the third option yet, or might not. That's observation, so I don't go further there. This working report, and this is probably the best stage in our system, that's what we're most proud of, is that the working report must be discussed during a lunch, usually, between the responsible teacher, 2 student representatives, and the program coordinator. That's a mandatory meeting, and it mostly happens. Not always, but as Elinor Ostrom, a Nobel Prize winner, said, if you have 2/3 with you, you probably have everything. It's a rule of thumb, which I like to believe in when I need. So this is a conversation about the course. After this one, did I include that in the next? I have to look. Yeah. The course leader, the students, and the program coordinator independently write a summary of that conversation, which is then included in the end report. So there is a mandatory conversation about the data. Sorry, did you notice? There is a conversation about the material. So easy to slip into that. Which is then documented the people's interpretation of that. Because that's what we come to think. We want to create conversations about teaching and learning, and this is an excellent place to do that. Yeah, and the last stage is that the end report summaries the conversations, stage 5, statistics, no open-ended comments anymore, are published on the LTH intranet and emailed back to all the students who took part in that course. So that's the feedback they get. That's sort of a feedback. Then we have teachers, good teachers, fabulous teachers, who start their courses by talking about the last year's course evaluation and describing why they managed to change this and not this, and why I will not change this because I think this is not good to do. But not all do that, of course. This is the system. It's a faculty of engineering. It's cumulative. We had it since 2003, so we now have 250,000 questionnaires in our database, which you're happy to come and visit if you're interested in what happens in these things. The good teaching scale I want to go into. So these are the 6 questions we ask students if trying to figure out whether there were good teaching in this. So there is a motivation there. I received many valuable comments. That's feedback stuff. The teacher may really understand the problems and difficulties. That's a really good one, we think, because that's an inquiry thing. The teaching staff normally gave me helpful feedback. That's another one. So we have 2 on feedback, since we think that is really, really crucial. My lecturers were extremely good at explaining things, so that's mostly sort of about the person now. So I'm here, I'm explaining, I'm engaging you. And some teachers can do that, and there is no students who are not deadly interested in the subject because the teachers do something which we don't understand what it is. And the teacher on the course worked hard to make subject interesting, which doesn't necessarily mean on-stage performance. It could mean instructions, choosing cases, field trips, lab works, all that kind of things, which is teaching, right? So we define teaching as everything we can do to support student learning. Even marking is teaching. Yeah. That's a 5-point Likert scale. Yeah, we have all these. And I'm going to show you the results now. The results is about, have we developed? We had it since 2003. We do a whole bunch of stuff. What has happened? What is the outcome? Well, here you have it. This is the year 2003 and 4, and you have 16, 17 up there. Please remember now, and I'm going to explain that to you, that the scale, again, these are engineers, so they program the machinery. So if the students tick 5, totally agree, that is coded as plus 100. If they tick 1, it's coded as minus 100. And a 3 is, of course, a 0. So what you see now is on this 200 sort of scale, we have moved from 3.9 to 23.7. Yeah. It's fair to ask now, is that good? We have no idea. We don't have a clear benchmark, right? And even if we had, we would find any kind of difference between that benchmark. We could send this to MIT and see, are we better than you? And they get 17.2, and we are, we're better. But, all the students are different, all the teachers are different, the reputation, culture, whatever is different. The only thing I'm proud of here, because I think that is worth attention, is the linearity of the development. So I would tell you now, which I could tell anyone, there is bloody hard arguing against that something good is happening in this faculty. I'm prepared to meet any one of you who want to stand up and say, these are false material. And I do that basically because we have a good form. We have the course experience questionnaire, which is better than many of the others. We have big numbers, and we have a long time scale, and it's almost linear. So it's a proof, I would say, as far as you can get when you claim proofs, that it is possible to change teaching in a university faculty, even among engineers. Or maybe because you're among engineers. When I try to talk about this in social science, they all go through, but what are your basic assumptions for the theories you use? And you know that they are conflicting according to this 1700 philosopher and to this, and therefore we don't need to listen to what you say. They're really good at that. Humanistic people will say, yeah, that's interesting. I think this is the problem. Yeah, but this is also a problem. And you can probably add this, and there's another problem. And it's like building a big snowball, you just add to it all the time. Yeah, but let's do something. If you're among engineers, it's more like, oh, this is interesting, let's do it. Yeah, but, shouldn't we think about the problem? No, we can test it afterwards, trial and error. Goes into, and we optimize, and so it's all different cultures in academia, but we're all academics, we're all trained in critical thinking, so it is possible to do. Yeah, it is possible to do. I can break these numbers down now on departmental level, and I will present this to the department heads in 2 weeks, and they haven't seen it. What I'm going to show you now. And it doesn't matter whether they see it before or not. But I know it's going to create some conversation. And this is what it looks like. So if you see up there, we have compared the numbers between 2007 and 2012. That's 1 point. Compare that with 2012-17, right? So how many questionnaires are in this? Bloody much, right? If any teacher or any manager of teaching would have these kind of data sets saying something about teaching, that would be really good. Mostly, all of us make decisions based on, we're going to go here. Anyway, So what I want to ask you now, in the name of the UK idea about TEF, the Teaching Excellence Framework, where we're supposed to give gold medals to the best ones and bronze medals to the lousy ones. Sorry, Paul, we can all laugh about it, because this is England, you know. And England has proven itself to be an interesting country during the last couple of years. So, but even so, I want you to go into the shoes of the TEF people, because you're now going to award stars or medals. Which one of these our A to S department deserves the gold medal? And of course, we can do that in many ways. This one clearly should have one. But if you become contextual again, you realize that that department is only 11 people, and they have 3 courses only in year 4 and 5. It's not hard to teach there, is it? It's immune technology. Dedicated students. L would be a good candidate, wouldn't it? They are not the best, but my God, they've done something interesting. And we have no idea what they have done. Yet. We will ask them, right? We're going to go there and say, what bloody hell, what did you do? And they might say, following, was it Paul or was it someone else saying, we're following the reform principle of death. You know, the bad teacher left or something. I have no idea. Or should we give a gold star to one of this? I mean, this one hasn't developed at all, basically. They're good, but they don't develop. Is that good? Should we reward development or should we reward absolute quality? How would we know? That's why we need the context all the time. That's why this would, if it's trustworthy, it wouldn't be a grand national scheme. It has something that you need to construct in your own context. So it means something, right? And how do you do that in a system of institutions? Well, you could go for institution. You could say all institutions should have. And if one institution say, yeah, we're so different in my institution, so we need different sets for different faculties, I would say yes. If they say, we are so different, so we need different sets for different departments, I would go, are you really that different? And I know they would say, yeah, you know, there is such a huge difference between organic chemistry and inorganic chemistry. It's like night and day, you know. There is absolutely no link. There is a door and we don't talk to each other. So there must be some kind of critical mass to get a variation, but you couldn't do it too grand, right? This is last slide, I think, for engineering. This is our strategy for change. We were asked earlier by, was it Oddrun? Thank you. Was it right? Oh, excellent. God. Since I don't remember people that well, I rarely use words, but I have to this time, because what we need is a theory of the mechanisms that lead to change. How could we? Otherwise, it's like, you know, oh, you have a bad leg. Let's chop it off, regardless what it is, you know, because it worked previously. Most patients didn't die, so it must be successful. But as you go into the mechanisms of the body, you realize that this bloody molecule should be hampered here by adding this. And you can get migraine out of your head. They can actually do that now. They can give medicine against that because they know what bloody molecule actually create that problem, right? We have to go a far route before we know what bloody molecule creates sort of good graduates or not. But this is our principle. We believe that things become better if the academics talk more and better about teaching. And better means being more scholarly. Using their research mind, if you want, and critically investigate what's in front of them. That's what better is. It probably means writing local papers about your teaching, because when academics write on text, they have to be good. It's in the system. If you say to them, I want you to write these, you write 2 pages about what you did, and that's going to be placed on the intranet for all the others to read, they immediately raise their ambition with this, because if it's in writing, as we all know too, academics have a tendency of being able to say the most horrendous things when they talk. But when you write, it's for real. Yeah, so we do a lot of stuff. We have a conference, we have newsletters, written accounts. We have 600 written accounts from teachers about teaching in a database searchable for all teachers in that faculty. All engineers writing education to each other, right? The best one is a piece by Anna Axelsson, teacher in computer science, with the title, Can You Trust Peer Assessment? And according to her, you can. Yeah, you can read that one. It's in Swedish. Sorry, Paul. Quality of conversations. We have courses, teaching portfolios, conference. I mean, most of these things are sort of regular standard tools for anyone working in educational development. But quality in conversations definitely go into the teaching academy we have. And the reward schemes I know for excellence in teaching you are developing here in Norway is because you want a better quality in the conversations. And we know that these portfolios go up in quality, and we know that those who become rewarded actually do talk in a better way to others. So those reward schemes are good things, and the Norwegian government made a good decision. Even though there are some old and very prestigious and big universities close to here who do not seem to really buy into it. Probably because they experience that, okay then, we have to do it because they tell us, but we are not going to go there anymore, we're going to go here instead. So, yeah, we've seen that. We also need quality in leadership, and this is where we know so little about leading academics. I would say on this stage, and in this stage in my thinking, that leadership goes contrary to most of the ideas about what we do in academia. Most of the things we do in academia has to do with complexity. And we love to maintain complexity. The more complexity we can help our students to deal with, solo taxonomy and all that, the better it is, right? Leadership actions is about making a call that I can reduce your complexity in a good way. And most academics get a creeping feeling, you can get your small hairs raising up, and it comes up to your mouth, and you say, no, I don't want that, because you reduced to me and I didn't do it myself. So I think there is a lot of things to think about, researching and understanding before we know how it's done. Because it is done. It's always done. I know many academics that know exactly, I love to work with that boss. I didn't like to work with that boss. So there is definitely something. There is a phenomenon called good and bad leadership in academia. It's just that we don't know yet. And we're also disturbed by all the sort of companies and the market sector coming in and say, but we know leadership. We have this big company called IKEA or Ericsson or whatever big company we have in Norway. And we know exactly how to manage people, and you can do it like us, And we earn money too. But that's a totally different environment. We never have sort of black or red numbers in the end of anything. We just have new things to do. Sorry. Yeah. So this is my end slide, right? From an article by Darwin. Obviously not Charles. I don't think his name is Charles. So he concludes that should teacher focus on student expectations, high numbers on set, maybe, or should students be challenged, frustrated, and have dissonant experiences for the end good, right? He assumes, because there could also be bad teaching. Should teachers innovate? Because first time you innovate in a big course, it doesn't work. Most people know that. If I change something, it will not work the first time. And I get bad student evaluations. Should set metrics lead development, or should context-specific experiences lead? And teaching is a context, you know. Otherwise, if we go the other way, we would have to say to students the first day of the course, you know, this is a course being evaluated through these metrics, assuming that people are like that. So I'm now going to teach you exactly as I would have taught a person like that, despite the fact that 80 of you and you all have different backgrounds. I mean, that's crap. And you can read the last one yourself. Yeah. This is going to be put up on the website of the conference, I guess, these slides. Will they? Have I gotten an email of that? Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I include all the references so you can read more for yourself, because that's what we do in academia. We include references.